Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Basil Considine. I'm here from the ACU Online Writing Center, and today we're going to be doing a webinar where we look at how to write up a case study through the lens of an undergraduate nursing student assignment. This is one of a much larger series of webinars that we have at ACU, where we look at different topics and we look at different genres of writing and at different levels, whether we're talking undergraduate, master's, or doctoral. Now, if you're not familiar with the Online Writing Center, we work with students in just about every online program at ACU. The Graduate School of Theology is kind of doing its own thing, and they have their own progression. But if you're in any program besides those GST programs, we're more than happy to work with you. Students can send us emails. You can make an appointment to send us a draft and then get feedback via email, or you can make an appointment to have a real-time appointment to get feedback where you can ask questions and get the answer immediately. Which you choose depends on schedule availability and your own preferences. We have some students who will sign up for that 11 p.m. slot because they want to upload their draft, go to bed, and then not worry about things until the next day, which is totally fine. We also have people who want to be able to ask questions back and forth, and so they select a real-time appointment, also just fine. Okay, so if you go to the Writing Center page and go to our webinars page, you'll see that we have this tabbed guide where you can select a particular program and look at all the webinars that tie in with that specific program. So if you have a particular genre of writing that you're looking to do for the first time, you can just do a word search on a website. But you can also look and see, because we sort these, we tag them by the course, and then have details like the assignment name that you can also search for if we have a specific tie in there. You'll see me using our APA course paper template later. We have a YouTube channel where you can watch our webinar videos on the go. And we also have a blog where we explore different topics. Now, I encourage asking questions as we go along. These webinars are developed in response to requests by students such as yourselves. So if there's something you'd like to ask, just type away. If you'd rather ask privately, just go ahead and send me a private message and no problem. I can answer it for the group. All right, so we're going to start by looking at what is a case study and how to write it up. Then we're going to look specifically at this assignment and what it's asked to do and how to read the instructions and start drafting the assignment. And I think we'll have time to also look at some of the related research. Because if I recall correctly, this assignment does ask that you obtain some peer-reviewed journal articles to ground your argument. So let's talk about writing up a case study. And before you begin, we want to make sure that you are answering every prompt from the assignment, and that if you are writing about your own experience, you use I statements. If you're not, if you're responding, if you're writing up something that is being provided to you, then we'll be describing the events as relayed there. And we'll talk about how to do the APA style in a little bit. We want to make sure we're using the language of the prompts. APA style is very particular about using the same language to refer to the same thing. And especially with any sort of healthcare, we don't want to mix things up because while a generic and a brand name may have the same functional effect on the patient, they have a real difference when it comes to billing. And if the insurance comes back and says, we're not paying for that, that's a brand name. And you're like, oh, shoot, I keyed it in, we actually gave them the generic, then there's extra paperwork and no one wants to be having to work on that when you're trying to close out your shift and get out the door. So let's use consistent word choices to refer to the same thing. And when you're using the rubric and instructions, we want to use that as a guide for how you're sorting this. Because if you read through case studies, there are many different ways to organize them. But in this particular case, we want to follow the path that has been laid out by the instructor through the course instructions and the rubric. Now, when you're citing information for this case study, we ask a couple questions. First, is it published in the sense that this is something that is accessible to the public, that someone who is not enrolled in this class could access? If yes, then we'll go ahead and cite and reference it. If not, then we'll refer to it in text, but not formally cite or reference it. So if it appears in a course textbook, well, anyone could buy the textbook, so you would cite and reference that. If it appears only on the course website, then we would refer to it in the text, but we wouldn't have a parenthetical citation and we wouldn't have a reference entry at the end. So for that latter example, you might say something to the fact of, in the provided case study, Carl and Mary are, or in the provided case study, Penny is a patient who is presented with X and Y and Z. And then later, when you're referring back to it, you say, in this case study, Mary has a problem with, Penny reports, whatever it is. Now, when you're discussing events that take place in the case study, so case studies, sometimes you're given information about when you first become involved, and there may be some retrospective, oh yes, on Saturday they did such and such a thing. And so the past tense would be before you have contact with the patient. Present would be what you do with the patient. And future would be, okay, things that haven't taken place yet. You know, you recommend that they do things, well, they'll have to follow up, and whether they will or won't, it'll be future tense. We also want to be careful about the use of phrasing. So if we're using conditional to make a recommendation, let's use language like should and not would, because would is talking about things that could have happened, but haven't. So conditional past, what might have happened. Oh, Fred would have gotten fired if Barney had not provided him with an alibi. Conditional present, when you're talking about things that might still happen. Well, Fred would need to complete 10 days of perfect attendance in order to get this. So with that framing background, let's take a look at what this assignment asks you to do. So this is coming from the NURO 338 course, the week 2 assignment for case study about Penny. So this is assignment instructions that begin with a preamble. This lays out, okay, what's the purpose here? Okay, you're going to analyze a patient scenario and apply your knowledge learned about renal physiology and pharmacological treatment. And that's really what case studies are about. You take some sort of situation or event, you write about it in a little bit in the abstract, and then you look at it and say, okay, well, what does that teach us? What will we do here? What we would apply? What could be done better? Or some section of those things, we're using the case study, the events and actions to say, all right, well, this is what this teaches us, or this is what we should do to apply our training so far. So in this case, it's saying, apply your knowledge learned about renal physiology and pharmacological treatment to this particular patient. And that's going to be very different if your case study is, hey, they have advanced kidney failure, versus, well, they're getting a transplant tomorrow, or, we had some blood in the urine and we're trying to figure out what's going on. So the assignment instructions continue with some framing instructions that say, after reading Penny's case study on page 372, which, going back to our earlier discussion about how you're citing the case study, well, if it's something where you have something that is accessible to the public, where someone could go and get this book in the library or order it and read it, then we want to be doing a formal APA cite and reference. So since this is referring to pages, it sounds like it's something that might be available to the public and that we'd want to cite and reference. Okay, so after reading that, rewrite and revise Penny's care plan using the ADPIE nursing process to help in the resolution of her renal function. So we're not just describing, we want to revise the care plan so that it is producing an effective outcome. Okay, so that's the kind of framing thing, but let's look at the specifics of what this assignment instructions ask you to do. Write at least 2 pages using APA formatting, scholarly writing, and evidence-based practice, peer-reviewed sources pertinent to disease process. Okay, sounds straightforward enough. You might ask, well, what is 2 pages in APA formatting? And that's going to be roughly 500 words, because in APA formatting, we'll be using double spacing, 12-point font, and usually Times New Roman, and that'll work out to roughly 250 words per page. So when they say at least 2 pages, we don't want 1.5. That won't look like at least 2. Do a full 2 or perhaps 3. 5 would probably be excessive for this assignment. All right, so looking at this, we see in your revised plan, we have a set of things here. And whenever you're reading assignment instructions, whether it's for this or another program, I recommend that you treat the instructions as a list of requirements rather than a list of suggestions, or, keep it in mind, maybe this would be cool to do. In this case, the assignment instructions and the rubric are lists of things that your instructor will be looking for when they grade the paper. And if you provide this information in the order that is listed here, it will be much easier for them to say, well, yeah, they did do that, check. They did do that, check, which is what we like to see when people are grading their stuff. There's also a note saying, use the ACU Library Doctor of Nursing Guide to find your sources. We'll talk about that in a moment. Now, if we look at the rubric here, we see that the rubric provides a mechanism for seeing just how much you should be writing in different places. So looking at the bottom, 5% of the points go to, well, how long is this paper going to be, and is it following APA, and does it have citation in the reference page? It's kind of assumed that, okay, all your assignments will be in APA style, so 5% goes there. But you can see that 25%, a quarter of the points, go to, hey, have you assessed the body system here in a relevant fashion? 20% goes to, did you identify the pertinent patient problems? And so on and so forth. So most of the points are, hey, have you given the very specific information that they're asking for? So with that in mind, let's go ahead and look at how you would start outlining and drafting this. And you can do some of this even before you read the exact case, because you've been given a formula of pieces of information that the instructor wants to see in a logical order. And we even have in the rubric, you can see it says assessment, diagnosis, planning, interventions, evaluation. It's laid them out in the order for that, for the ADPI process. So, all right. Now, when you're working on this, you are asked to obtain some peer-reviewed sources. That's that first sentence here, evidence-based practice, peer-reviewed sources. So those are probably going to be scholarly journal articles. Generally speaking, something like clinical key is not considered acceptable when they're asking for peer-reviewed sources. It's not that those suggestions aren't evidence-based, but it's not the level of research that we're looking for. So here we have the general guidelines for referencing a journal article. We have the list of authors, their initials. We have the publication year, the title of the article, then the journal name, whatever it should be, the volume number, the issue number if there is one, that's the 96 and the 1, and the page range, 44 to 52, followed by a link or a DOI to that specific article. And this is following the general schema. Okay, who wrote this? When was it published? What's it called? And how do you find it? Now, when you're doing a in-text citation in your paper, You'd be just giving the last names or the shorthand, Kreuzberg et al., because we have more than 2 authors, and the publication year. And that can occur in a couple different forms depending on where it is in the sentence. So for the next stage, we're going to grab a copy of the APA course paper template that you can download either from your class, this course site in Canvas, or from the ACU Online Writing Center website. So I'm going to go grab a copy of that. And let's go ahead and open it. You can follow along on your own computer if you prefer, or go through this process later. But let's take a look at this template here. So when I look at this, we see we have some placeholders to fill in. Your name, your course paper title, your course, your instructor. That's simple enough. But we want to make sure that this title here corresponds exactly to this title here, because that's a requirement for APA style. And no one likes to lose points for formatting. So let's just make sure we start by having that set. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete all this placeholder text. And we're going to start by copy and pasting the assignment instructions into this document. I'll zoom out a little bit just so you can see everything more clearly. So we've got the assignment instructions. And I paste them here, and I'm just going to go ahead and mark them in italics so it's clear what are the instructions. And we can see that we have this set of requirements here. Well, if we go ahead and we look at the rubric, let's jump back there. If we look at the rubric here, it's showing us how this is organized: assessment, diagnosis, planning, interventions, evaluation. Great. So that means that when we are setting this up, we can add headings that say, hey, this is where I have this bit of information that you've asked for. So assessment, followed by diagnosis, planning, interventions, and evaluation. Now, if you open up the styles menu, so if you're on the home part of the ribbon, open up the styles pane here, we have different styles we can add. You just have to click anywhere into this word or select it. And then on this menu, select APA Level 1. Boom. We have an APA Level 1 heading all formatted correctly. We'll do that for the other headings as well. And now it's a sort of a system of labels to show exactly where in this paper that's going to go. And then when you see text that you've done it, we can go ahead and just cross that out so we are not distracted by it. All right, so we have the assessment of the body system to write, the diagnosis. So we see this and like, oh, well, that's going to be number 1 and number 2. So as you are reading through the description, the course text, you have a map saying, oh, I need to identify at least 2 patient problems. You see them, number 1, you write it here. You see number 2, you write it there. And that gives you a roadmap to write things up. Similarly here, we know we need to have at least 3 SMART goals. So we'll make spaces to put them in. Same thing with the interventions. We need at least 5. And then the evaluation and predictions. So and part of the idea here is to work efficiently. You know there are certain things you have to include. So if you do this up as a guide, you can be filling in these things as you do the reading and then go back and write them up as prose sentences and paragraphs. Now, let's look at the last thing that we'll be talking about, which is evidence-based practice, peer-reviewed sources. Now, if you are new to research, you might be wondering, well, where do I go and find those? And that link to the guide will take you to a set of resources developed by the ACU online library staff. But we're going to go ahead over to the library website, and it happens it's saying, hey, a librarian is online ready to help. So let's go ahead and we're going to open up the chat window. And I'm going to put in as many specifics as possible. And specifically looking for evidence-based practice articles on, let's say for the sake of our example here, that you are looking for liver function. All right. Now we have this box here, and so long as we're within business hours where this is being staffed, then we have access to the library team. Now, you can always go to our library staff. They're fabulous. And if you're doing a longer project, they can even do things like set up a save search so that you get emails automatically when new things show up with your topic. So you can see Melissa's asked a clarifying function saying, hey, you're looking for this exact thing. Often there's more than one way that something might be worded. Now, we can also go to the catalog directly. So while Melissa's looking through there, I'm also going to open up a search on the library website. You can get there through the distance education portal, but it'll take you in the end to one search. So let's look at a different window here. And in this window, we're going to search for liver function evidence-based practice. Now it will ask you to log in if you're not already, no problem. You see how fast that's going. And we'll see the preliminary results. Now you'll see that we have different resources. So if you're just studying this in general, we might go to Credo Reference because it's got a lot of short focused articles. But we want scholarly journal articles, and we specifically want peer-reviewed and ones we can read right now. So here on this left-hand side, we're going to select that we want it to be full text, meaning we can get everything now, should be scholarly, peer-reviewed. And if we go ahead and look in the chat window, we can see that our library colleague has asked an excellent question. Do they need to be peer-reviewed and recent, meaning the last 5 years? Now, for some assignments, you'll be asked to make sure you have recent research. In others, it'll be more open, but it's a good idea to look at things that are recent because, for example, last 5 years, I can say that, asthma practice guidelines change. So we want to be looking usually at things that are more recent than not. So in addition to full text, meaning I can read the whole thing now, and scholarly peer-reviewed journal articles, we're also going to set this to be from 2019 to present. Now that's 4 years, but if this is something I want to come to later, that will give me a little bit of leeway there. And so sometimes people will set it to, say, 2020 to present for that same reason. If we look at this, we see that we have a wide range of articles here. And these are about a number of different things. Let's see, hepatitis B, okay, celiac disease, liver maximum capacity test. Okay, so we might want to narrow things down here a little bit more. And whatever it is that you're doing, and I know that this case study has a separate focus, but for our purpose of illustration, let's say that we are working on hepatitis C. So I've added that in quotations because I wanted to search for hepatitis and C together. Doesn't mean that other ones won't come up, but it means that we'll be looking for those two together. And we see, oh, actually this one here looks like it might be very much of interest here. So I've gone ahead and I can read this. I can click this and it'll open up. And we see down here an abstract describing the research. What does this article describe? They did a pretty good sized study. And we can see what they were functioning, what they were testing. They're using the ALB scores. And before we go any further there, let's jump back to our other window, because you can see that in the space of less than 3 minutes, Melissa has done up a sample search for us to look at. So I'm going to copy that and open it in our other screen. And we see, aha, starting with guidelines for management of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And we can even look and see what she searched for. She had this set up, so look for evidence-based practice or evidence-based medicine, either one. So that's a good thing because it's looking for other ways that this might be described. So one of those two and liver function. And you can see that she put in date restrictions and only peer-reviewed things, and we'll just go ahead and add the full text here. And so while I've started doing a search myself, by talking with the search expert, we ended up at something that was even better and more focused than what I was doing on my own. And this is a great reason to go to the library. All right, so back to our search here. So whatever article you read, you can go to the abstract as you see here and see, is this something that you think is relevant to what you're trying to do? Whatever you might be looking for Penny. In this case, you could take the string and substitute liver for another organ. Let's say that Penny was having epilepsy and some liver issues here. So you might say, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab that one. You can use this cite button and it will do most of the APA formatting for you. So you can actually grab this and paste it into my Word document. So here we're making my outline. I go down to the references. We'll get rid of those placeholders and paste that one in here. And you'll notice the font isn't quite right. That looks like it's Helvetica. I want it to be Times New Roman like the rest. So I select this box and select Match Destination Formatting. Ta-da! All right, so I need another article. Let's go back to the search here. So let's say that I'm looking through these things here and again, ignoring the actual content here because we're just showing the how-to. I would say, I like this article too. I'm going to use it. Well, there's a cite button here as well. That brings up that same menu. and I can see APA style. Great. Paste this. And this goes, again, I paste, and it's not quite right. So I select match destination formatting, much better. Now, if you're looking at this, you see that it has this URL here where this link here, this works for people with at ACU, but we want it to be in this format here where it just starts with doi.org, so anyone can use it. So I can go ahead and I select this, and if I press Command K or Control K, that's for adding or editing a link. I can go ahead and I'm just going to change this to that universal format and update it, and here we go. So I've got 2 journal articles that I've cited here. Now, of course, you do want to actually read them to make sure that they're relevant for what you're recommending and whatnot. But for if you were going to go cite these now, this one would be Watkins et al. 2020, and this would be Johnson et al. 2021. All right, I think that's going to be a good pausing point for our webinar today. If you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat. We do have time for questions, certainly. But just to recap here, we want to make sure that when you are doing up your outline, you are using the instructions provided to you, including the rubric, as a checklist for what you need to put into the paper. And when you are going through the process of writing things up, if there are cues like there was in the rubric where it is labeling and saying, hey, you should have assessment, diagnosis, planning, interventions, evaluation, especially when that's also something where they've told us to use the ADPI formula, that's a good, strong hint saying, hey, add some section headings so that it's clear that you're putting the right information they're asking for in the information that they're asking for. And this last is just talking about some of the heading things we've already shown. So if you do your write-up and you're not sure what to do besides reporting, you can take a look at this last slide, which talks about how to create a well-organized paragraph that is not just presenting data, but also analyzing it and telling us why or how this matters, which is the synthesis. So you might present, patient has X, Y, and Z. Okay, well, the analysis would be, is that normal? Is that abnormal? What is the treatment for that? Synthesis is, well, based on this, what should we do? Because the standard treatment might be one thing, but they have a condition, so you're going to recommend something else. And so your synthesis would be, well, in light of this, therefore we should do this other thing. All right, I think that concludes things for this evening. If you joined us partway and you want a copy of the webinar recording, just go ahead and type your email address in the chat window. Otherwise, thank you for joining us this evening. You can send us questions at onlinewritingcenter@acu.edu. And I bid you good night.